Welcome to the Del Walmsley Radio Show. Listen and grow as Del questions the status quo, encourages you to think differently, and empowers you to make a better life. Get ready as Del challenges core beliefs, seeks the truth, and reveals the roadmap to the lifestyle you really want. And now your host, multi-millionaire, national award-winning investor, CEO and founder of Lifestyles Unlimited, Del Walmsley.
Welcome to the Del Walmsley Radio Show, where the hype ends and the help begins. I'm your host, Del Walmsley, and as always, we're working on your financial freedom. Today, my friends, is Tell Del Tuesday, and with us here out of Tyler, Texas, is Brandon Hersley. And Brandon has technically become retired at a very, very young age, and we're very happy to have him here today to share his story. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Good morning.
Your voice sounds young. Why don't you get it out of the way right away? How old are you?
I'm 39 now.
39, and you started back in 2015, so you were, that's 8 years ago? So you're about 31 when you started, huh?
Yes, sir.
Very good. So let's talk about this. That's a very young age to become interested in finding a way to get out of being in the labor force. Most people have to be in the rat race for a couple of years before they get burned up enough to want to go look. What stimulated you at such a young age to want to look at options other than working for the rest of your life?
Well, I mean, at a very young age, I wanted to retire early in my whole life. I kind of had a goal, maybe when I was younger, retire by the time I was 40. Now, nobody agreed with me on that. Corporateville and college made that sound impossible. But, I just wasn't satisfied with the corporate environment. It was a whole lot of politics. You fight real hard to get, if you did better than everybody in the group, you get a 4% raise every year. The bonuses were pretty much a joke. Maximum bonus you'd get is $3,500 if you hit all your targets. So I was just kind of disappointed in that corporate climbing thing. So I started looking for other options. And at first, I tried to do all sorts of interesting things, internet businesses, day trading. I was thinking about even buying like a franchise restaurant or something like that. Then I heard you on the radio when I was taking my lunch breaks, and I said, this sounds like a better plan, and you're telling me I can retire way before I'm 40. So,
that's an interesting point, Brandon. I did the same thing when I was young. I looked around. I was like 31 when I started looking around for stuff like that. And you touch all those bases. You start out with the franchise things. Should I buy a Subway shop? And you look into these things, and it's really a lot of work for a very small amount of money, realistically. You opened your own business, it says here, logistics industry. What is that? Shipping?
Yeah. My wife, she her career is a licensed customs broker, so that's in the logistics industry, and she's worked for her family business for her whole career, and she started that while I was still working, and shortly after she started that, I exited the corporate environment, and I can tell you a story on that as well, because it didn't really do it completely by choice. They kind of traded me to another company. They sold our division, and they picked a couple people to lay off and put into another company. Laid me off, and then a couple of days later offered me my second job back. I declined the trade. And so for a little while we were still buying real estate, I started working in that business with her for a couple of years.
Got it. That's interesting. I've never heard it termed trade me off. That's a good one. All right, so you got this desire early in life. You went looking through all these options. 2015, you decided to do real estate, it looks like. The question is, what was most interesting to you? What attracted you about the real estate possibilities that the other options you had looked at weren't offering you?
You could start small. You could do one house, two houses, and you could just build up over time. Each one made you more money. And it was just an easy way to just step it in there, rather than the first franchise thing I was looking at was to do McDonald's, and you needed $500,000 to start that. So that's why I can't do that. To buy a house, $15,000 you could get in. So it was easy to raise the money to do that. And I always, playing Monopoly and stuff as a kid, I always said, I want to own a bunch of real estate, own a whole street. So it was always in my mind to do real estate.
It's interesting how close Monopoly is to real life when you really play the game the right way. It really does work. People just don't get that. I mean, it's very close to life itself. Let's talk about your path. Let's go back. Let's start with listening to, did you listen to the radio shows? How did you become familiar with lifestyles?
Yeah, I started listening to the radio show quite a bit. And you were giving back then, piece by piece, exactly how to buy a house on the radio every day. So I took that information. I went on HAR, the Zillow type thing here in Houston, and I went and I checked out all that stuff, and it all made sense. I said I hadn't even joined Lifestyles at all at that point in time. I said, I can go buy a tenant occupied property. I can find out what the rent is, the contract rent. I can figure out my return without even putting an offer in. So that's how I did my first one. And actually, I did two of them, and then I joined Lifestyles after that. But yeah, so we bought two of them just by listening to you on the radio. Yeah.
Well, that's an interesting point because my brain does that a lot of times. I'm looking into something new, and I'm thinking, okay, I don't really need to be a part of any program or any training class or whatever. And I scour the internet. That seems to be a normal process for an intellectually based person, to scour the internet for ideas and come up with your own plan and experiment and try and fail and try and whatever. And then all of a sudden one day you go, hey, those guys are doing something at a higher level than I'm doing. Maybe I better just hook up with them now that I'm at that point. What was the point where you decided that it was worth hooking up with us? What was it you wanted to find out that you couldn't find out by just trial and error?
Yeah, so the first the duplex and the first house that we bought, it was going okay, but they were in rough neighborhoods, and I just kind of got the feeling that I could use a little more advice on how to deal with these residents and whatnot.
Brandon, on your decision to go passive, what were the reasons and what were you looking for in the lead investor or the deal that you were going into?
I started doing passive because I still had a full-time job. Wanted to get my money invested, and I didn't want to put it in the stock market anymore. So I found first one I got into, I was actually doing unit walks with somebody who was buying one. I walked like probably 30 or 40 units in this one property. So I got to know the lead investor. I got to know the property well. So I decided to pull the trigger on. At the time, I was still looking for my own, but I just decided to go ahead and put money in that one after that.
And you've got into three different ones. 244 unit, 276 unit, 160 unit. And let's see, I'm going to look at how long you're in this. 2015 to present, 2016 to present, 2070. So you're still in all three of these deals then?
Yeah, I'm in all three of them still.
And let's see, Hillcroft, Baytown, and Humble, Texas. These are all Houston properties?
Yeah, Houston area.
And are they cash flowing now?
Yeah, they have been. Not as good as my other properties, my single families and stuff, but they cash flow okay. That's kind of the reason why I kind of moved back into buying more single families, because I was making 25-30% on my houses and stuff. So I said, okay, and I wasn't working anymore when I stopped doing the passive investment. So I said, let's buy some more single family houses. So we started back into putting our money into single family for a little bit there.
There's never ever a time you will hate the fact that you bought single family houses, that's for sure. Between the instant captured equity and the larger amounts of cash flow, rate of return wise, the capital gains in the long run, I mean, they're a beautiful investment, there's no doubt. But somehow, even with that, you got pulled back into the multifamily. and decided that you wanted to be a lead investor yourself. Tell us about that. How did that happen?
Well, even though the single families are very profitable, you can make a lot more as a lead. And, you know, I was full-time dedicating my career to this now. So I said, well, I have so much more time. I don't need to be messing around with these small single-family properties. At that time, we shut down our little logistics business, and I was ready to go and build up something bigger. So we started doing that. My wife actually went to go work for Corporateville after that. And I full-time prepared myself prepared my team, we had to sell some properties actually to raise the money to do that. So we started doing that, and about a year into that, we found our first property up in Conroe, Texas, a 16-unit property. Right as COVID was hitting, actually, we put an offer in before COVID even existed, and by the time we closed, we had already gone through that lockdown period. So it was a pretty interesting period.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting that you start during the toughest times that we've ever had in my entire history of doing real estate. You started right in the beginning of that, so that's really a punch in the gut to start that way. But one of the points you made is very interesting, is that if you are going to do this as a business, to be able to add the benefit of being a lead investor on top of the benefit of being invested in a property and the benefit of multifamily being able to change and reposition its value by changing its income and expense structure, all of those add up to much larger gains in the long run than a single-family house. But you have to be in that position, right, to be able to make that move where you can take and operate this property. Let's talk about that. Picking this up right at the beginning of 2020, how did it work out for you? Because I normally see 16 units, small properties under 20 units they're dynamite. They usually rock and roll and improve in value very quickly because it's so easy to turn 16 units around. There's only 16 people to replace compared to turning around 200 or 300 units. To get your value up, you have to do that rinse and repeat 200 or 300 times compared to rinse and repeat 16 times. How did it work out for you?
So yeah, COVID was a little bit interesting. It was a little bit harder to close, but we got it done. And then for another 9 months, I didn't really get to put my plan in place because you didn't want to raise rents on people during COVID. Luckily, everybody was paying the rent, so I didn't have to do anything about that, which was kind of rare, I think. Luckily, we took over a really good tenant base. But so for almost a year, we didn't even implement the plan. But it went fine. I mean, we had almost 100% collections throughout that period. And then maybe 9 months in, we started. If anybody moved out, we moved them up to higher rents, and we redid the property. We didn't have a lot of rehab on it, but we redid the units the way we wanted them. And then the next year, we really started hitting our plan and raising rents and moving around the resident base to what we wanted. So yeah, and it took us 27 months to get to sale, and we ended up raising the income enough to where we got an 86% return in 27 months. 86%
return, and does that include the cash flow added on that or not?
That includes the cash flow.
I have to do a little quick calculation because that's a strange number for me.
38% annualized.
There you go. Thank you. You just saved me going through the mathematical gyration to figure that out. So 38% during COVID, annualized, 2.5 years. Not bad deal. Not bad at all. I would have liked to have been involved in that. So you sold it. What's the process? What's next?
So we had already bought a 42 unit before we sold that one. So once we got that pretty stabilized and got a COVID, we started looking for another property. We had to sell some more single families to raise some of our own personal cash to buy that. So we bought a 42 unit in Houston. And shortly after that, I live in Houston right now, not in Tyler, by the way. So I live down south in Houston, and Conroe is a pretty good distance away from where I live. So shortly after that, I wanted to stop driving that far, and it was a good return. So I said, let's go ahead and sell that one off. And we have our 42 unit that we need to put a lot of work into.
We'll take a break. We'll be right back with the Del Walmsley Radio Show and Brandon Hursley.
Teaching you with a roadmap to creating the lifestyle you really want. Keep listening. The Del Walmsley Radio Show returns in moments.
Lifestyles Unlimited members share their stories and strategies for success at case study events.
If you got laid off tomorrow, what would you do? Would you have to be working at McDonald's or wait to try and find another job with the downsizing the economy? Kept on coming to meetings, even with David Fisher online and stuff like that, but still we just we need to make the jump.
So we kept praying for time to get this job done, to be able to find the properties. How do we find the properties? How do you find the time? And God answered our prayers, and he got downsized from his corporate job.
But they didn't buy just one house, right?
No, they did not. You're rehabbing house number
9 right now.
9.
Wow.
So every month, the cash flow is $3,200. Okay, the equity of all the houses is up to $280,000.
Join us this month and learn from people just like you. Check in person and online dates at lucasestudy.com. That's lucasestudy.com.
You're hearing the Del Walmsley Radio Show. Want more life-changing knowledge? Access our podcast and listen on demand at lifestylesunlimited.com under the radio tab. Now your host, Del Walmsley.
Welcome back to the Del Walmsley Radio Show. Here with me on Tell Del Tuesday is Brandon Hursley out of Houston, Texas now. He's currently, we're talking about a 42-unit he purchased up in Conroe. And you said you didn't like the drive because you live in South Houston area and you were driving all the way up there. How long did you own this 42 units?
That was still the 16 unit in Conroe. The 42 unit was the second one that we bought in the Houston area, which was only like 30 minutes away from my house, which was a lot better.
All right, but do you still own this one? Because this one isn't on your resume at all. So tell us about the 42 unit. Do you still have it?
Yeah, we bought that about 15 months ago, before we sold the 16 unit. So we just moving on up, trying to get some bigger properties under us, and eventually our goal is to get 100 plus unit with full management and staff. And so the 42 unit we purchased, it's in South Houston area. It was kind of made to be like a yield play, but it had like really bad resident base. We've had to switch out almost like 80% of the residents there, mainly for just not paying rent. So we've been working on that. It was a rehab property already, so we're just it's amazing what having the wrong resident base can do to your property. But so we've been switching it out.
Well, that's an obvious. Let's talk about the differences between operating a 16 unit and a 42 unit. Did you find any differences? Were you able to get any economics of scale out of that or not?
Sure. The 16 unit was a lot of my work. I didn't do the painting or the plumbing or anything like that, but as far as leasing and any of the small things, I kind of did it myself. So it was very time consuming. The 42 unit, I have basically a maintenance guy that does almost all the work. I have in my budget a part-time manager. Currently, I'm pretty involved, just trying to get it up to speed so that we can move on to our next property. But yeah, it's a lot easier. 42 unit is kind of borderline. Can you put a staff in there or not? It's in a bit of a tough area. So it's still a bit challenging, still very time-consuming.
Yeah, that is the very bottom, the very, very bottom of having any kind of staff at all. Usually somebody that buys one of these tries to tie it to something else, pick up something else around it and make them brother-sister kind of properties to to work with. But it does allow you to have at least one person, and that, eyes, even if it's eyes, ears, hands, legs, and not you. It goes over there every day. That makes a big difference in all this stuff. But to have a maintenance guy, that really is quite beneficial if you got a maintenance guy out of the deal. So that's good. Let's talk now about the plan, because you're sitting there right now looking for another property, or you have another one in your sights, do you not?
I just started looking. I'm still kind of thinking, man, there might be a recession in like 2 to 3 months. Should I just wait a couple more months? That's kind of what I'm thinking now. I'm just kind of putting my toes in there, seeing if there's anything out there. Right now, I'm finding that a lot of the people selling still want a lot of money, and they don't think they're in a bad market. So we're looking.
Well, they lost 2,000 units plus in Houston 2 weeks ago. 95 apartment complexes went out of business in San Francisco or San Diego, one of the two. I can't remember which one it was. Just last week. It's starting to happen. Things are starting to fall apart. Now, I haven't seen it yet. I've seen the prices come down. In fact, the prices, Brandon, are down across the board about 22% in the Houston market. And I'm seeing that. In other words, it used to be you'd go after a property. They'd ask for $10 million, and by the time it sold for $15 million. People would run the prices up. Now, pretty much if they ask for $10 million, they'll be lucky to get 10 or 11 million. But I have not seen it yet where they're asking $10 million and they're actually selling for $8 million. It hasn't dropped like that. It just hasn't expanded anymore. But that doesn't mean it won't. If things keep getting worse as far as financing and so on and so forth, and banks keep going out of business, there's that possibility. I would suggest to you that your approach be, if it is not already, keep your nose on that stone, keep looking. And when something falls out from under a rock, jump on it, because there will be somebody that is scared of the market that's willing to sell. There will be somebody that has a problem in their life that are going to be willing to sell to get out of that problem. And if you're there waiting, and remember, luck is proper preparation meets opportunity. If you're there prepared and waiting and you see it, you jump, then you're going to be able to move on to, you said you wanted an 84 unit. I guess the concept is that you're looking to double what you've got. Really, any size size is better, because if you can go up and even get a 60 unit, you put it with the 40 units, now you got 100 units. Now, maybe not all in one place, but if you've got them anywhere near each other at all, say anywhere in the south part of Houston, and you pick up that 60 unit, you now have a full staff at the 60, a manager and a maintenance man, but they can help parallel to this other deal. Hey, that guy needs 2 people to do something. You can get somebody over there. Or another thing that's really beneficial is to have weekends where they're on call. If you have 2 maintenance guys, even if it's one guy at one property, one guy at the other property, you let them alternate weekends. Say, okay, you're covering both properties this weekend. You've got off. Now your guy can have a life. He can go have fun with his family, take off, and know he's not going to get called in. And that's a major step for the maintenance department. Absolutely. Same thing with the managers. You have somebody on call, not both people. And eventually, not you. So that's really beneficial. Let's talk about, what do the other people around you think about this?
Sure. Well, start off, my wife of 10 years, she's been very supportive of the whole thing. She's not incredibly involved in the day-to-day stuff, but she's kind of my therapist, when I come home, tell her all the crazy stories that go on. That's a daily thing. So definitely her. She's been very supportive. My parents have been very supportive, especially my dad. My dad went in on the first property that we bought, the duplex. It was in, Sunnyside, and helped me do the unit walk on it. And the second one that we bought in Sunnyside, helped me do the unit walk on that. So he's been incredibly supportive. But other than that, everybody has thought I was crazy, pretty much.
So I had a guy that used to be a member here, and his son-in-law has now been an employee for me for like 20 years. And He made all of his kids, when they asked him, because he had like 100 houses, 80 houses, something like that. They asked him how to do it, how to get rich and successful. He said, look, here's these 5 books. You have to read these 5 books. When you've read these 5 books, which are basically the books that we recommend you read here at Lifestyles, after you read these 5 books, then I'm going to give you something else to do. And he made them go through the process where he said, okay, now you're going to go do this. And if they did what he said, then he would continue teaching them. But if they didn't read the book and proved they read the book, in fact, he made one of the things is you have to read the 5 books and then you got to go join Lifestyles. And if they didn't read the books and join Lifestyles, then it didn't help him. End up one family member ended up doing it. His daughter and this gentleman that works for me now. And his daughter's worked for me before as a real estate agent also.
I tried to do something similar to that. The person that I'm trying to convince to do it now, I said, here's 2 books, Richest Man in Babylon and Rich Dad Poor Dad. Read them and then come back to me. And they haven't finished yet.
Exactly. Those are the 2 books. 2 of the 5 books that absolutely they should read and understand if they want to become an entrepreneur. There's no doubt about it. So do you guys have any kids at all?
Yes. I definitely want to make sure I mention them. We have 2 daughters, Isabel, 6 years old, and Olivia is 3 years old. So,
what do they think about the fact that Daddy doesn't get up and go to a job every day?
I don't think they're old enough to really figure it out. I tell my 6-year-old that she's my vice president, and she doesn't really understand that. But it'll be a little bit longer till they can figure it out. I don't know what happens in school when they say, "What does your daddy do?"
That's a hard one. People ask me that. What do I do? And I have no idea what to tell them. Even doing this for 40 years, I have no idea what to tell them. So, really,
that's the first thing that people ask you when you meet them. They're like, "What do you do for a living?" I don't know.
Exactly.
Real estate.
Yeah, they ask you that first thing, and for me, when they find out that I live in a nice home and got a little bit higher quality of lifestyle, then they really want to know, what do you do, right? Like, knowing what you do actually will get you there. It's just a straight deal. But I guess that's the way the world is, and you really can't get upset about it. Let's talk about what's in your future, Brandon.
Yeah, so I guess the main goal is to retire my wife, Angie, from her corporate job and then bring her in to help me with the management company on, running the properties and asset management and things like that. She wants to do that really bad, and I want her to do it too. It'll open up a lot of freedom for us because even though I'm out of Corporateville, I still am controlled by her corporate job. She has a certain amount of vacation, and they terrorize her just like they terrorized me when I was in Corporateville. So I need we're looking to buy the next property, and I think if we size it right, it'll be the one that gets her out. So we're trying to do that by the end of this year.
Well, that's an interesting statement you just made, and I appreciate it. Well, thanks for coming on and sharing your story with us, and the rest of you out there, remember this. It's not the money. It's the lifestyle. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.
The information and opinions you hear on the Del Walmsley radio show are those of the host, Del Walmsley, his guests, and his callers. The Del Walmsley show is for entertainment purposes only. Please consult a professional regarding your personal investment needs. Nothing presented on the Del Walmsley show constitutes an endorsement, recommendation, offer, or solicitation to buy or sell any product or security.